August 4th of this year. It took me a while. I really needed to focus in the theory and figure out where everything was in my mind without actually thinking about it. I don't know if that makes any sense, but it's like when you think about stuff, you don't realize that you're thinking about them, but you really are. And it finally made sense to me. That's why I finally put Saturn on this diagram, and I haven't talked too much about it. But essentially, Saturn fits right about there. Right above gray dwarfs and below Jupiter's. Further from Jupiter than it is gray dwarfs. It's a star probably about 200 to 250 million years older than Jupiter, and it's much less dense. It's about 0.687 grams per centimeter cubed, which is about half of that of Jupiter. And in this paper I mentioned the reason why that is because it was probably orbiting a hotter star in its past, vastly closer than it is now. Meaning it was probably orbiting the sun, very, very close to the sun, and was ejected from its orbit by another object grabbing it and flinging it out further from the sun. Or it was orbiting another star entirely, but very close, like the hot Jupiters are that are observed by the Kepler Space Telescope and many other telescopes. And it's also why it's very puffed out, and the moons that it had when it was orbiting in that hot Jupiter configuration were ripped apart and ended up making rings, and the leftover ring material just stayed put. So there you go. There's the explanation for why it has rings, why it's puffed out, and why the atmospheric bands aren't very visible as they are on Jupiter's, because it was due to a lot of heating and mixing, because it was orbiting a lot closer to another host star in its past, which ripped away its atmosphere. It sits inside of the main evolutionary path here, and above the Taylor threshold, so Saturn will most definitely become something like Earth long, long, long into its future. It's not old enough yet. It's probably around 750 million years old. That being said, it should be noticed that it's not even a billion years old. All the objects in our system are all different ages. But establishment astronomy, they force Saturn, Jupiter, Neptune, Uranus, Earth, Mercury, Mars, Venus, Ceres, all the moons, all the asteroids, everything in the solar system to be 4.5 billion years old. Now, anybody who can see this diagram will see that the ages are on the bottom, duration in years. It takes time, lots and lots of time, to form objects that are this different. Different compositions, different weather patterns, different densities, different strengths of magnetic fields, different energies, different sizes, different masses, different elemental or molecular production rates. How fast are they producing molecules like methane and ammonia and water? Their orbital distances. All those are different, yet establishment forces them all to be the same age and doesn't have any explanation for it. They say, oh, it formed in a big disk, so they're all the same age and they formed around the sun as they are. No, it's a polymorphic system. All these objects came from somewhere else in the galaxy. And we can determine where they came from. We can determine how they evolved by looking at them, by studying them, by using their different physical characteristics to figure out what their pasts were, where they were, what they were doing, how evolved they are. Using establishment's approach of, oh, they all formed around the sun, and then engaging in torturous mental gymnastics to explain why they're different, that isn't the future of science. They need to take what they actually observe instead of trying to force theory to match the observations. Instead of doing that, they needed to make the observations and then form the theory. And that's what I'm doing. But they're not doing that anymore because, careerism and professionalism have taken over. Anyways, I think I made this video long enough.